Good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest with the first ever Chiefs Digest live conversation. Um, as I promoted it online, this is either going to be a lot of fun, very informative, or it is going to be an unmitigated disaster. So glad that anybody is here. I might be talking to myself. You never know. There may or may not be a surprise guest. You never know. This could just be me talking to myself for 55 minutes. I'll be going from here over to talk to Ryan Tracy with Locked On Chiefs. We'll be doing that at 4 o'clock Central Time. So for those of you who want to be online, you can get a lot of me over for the next hour and a half or so. But what we're going to be doing right now is just talking about what's going on live with the Chiefs and the roster cut down. If you have any questions, throw them up into the comment section. I'll be glad to answer them if I'm not knocking over my microphone. And glad to try and break down anything that we can and answer, like I said, answer your questions as they come in. This is my first live broadcast by myself hosting anything online. So if I am awkward, if I don't make any sense, if I stutter and stammer, I apologize in advance. Just bear with me. You guys are all my guinea pigs. I appreciate you coming along. And hopefully we'll learn a few things about what the Chiefs are doing here. The deadline is passed. Deadline was 3 o'clock for the Chiefs to have all their roster moves in for getting down to 53 players. So even though we don't know all the moves yet, they are in. And let's just start with the headline, which is that as of right now, we have heard nothing about Chris Jones. So nothing would mean two things. One, that there's no long-term deal, no new extension in place with Chris Jones. And two, apparently there is no trade involving Chris Jones that has taken place before the 3 o'clock deadline. Given those assumptions that we have, that apparently neither one of those things have happened, what would be the normal course of action here that I would expect to learn later this afternoon is that the Chiefs have placed Chris on the did not report reserve list. What does that mean? Well, that means that he goes on that list. He does not count against the 53-player roster. He also does not count against the salary cap, which was the biggest issue for the Chiefs with Chris and his $19.5 million base salary for this season. That was going to put him in a lot of hurt because according to the NFLPA salary cap report, Chiefs only had a couple of $100,000 of cap space going into the roster reductions today, which meant that since right now the salary cap only counts the top 51 salaries, they didn't have room for players 52 and 53. They wouldn't have room for a practice squad roster building on Wednesday, wouldn't have room for the guys on injured reserve like Jody Fortson and Nazeeh Johnson. So, they needed something to happen with Chris Jones. So the fact that he's still on the team at this point, that as far as we know, then it would indicate that they are going to move him to that did not report list, which means that for right now, the standoff will continue. When's it going to end? I don't know. This could go on for a little bit. By putting him on the did not report list, like I said, he will not count against the salary cap, won't count against the roster. What could happen next? Well, if Chris does show up anytime between now and, whenever it happens, if it happens between now and week one and before that Thursday night game against the Lions, then the Chiefs can apply for a roster exemption and they can get a 1 or a 2 game roster exemption, which again would allow Chris to work with the team, get in, get some work in, but again, would not count against the salary cap until that exemption is over. So at least they would still have some time to figure things out. Where's it going to happen with Chris? We don't know. But that's the biggest thing, is that at this point that we don't have any new development with Chris Jones. That's where it's at. Going on to kind of what we've learned today, Cole makes a great point there when you're making that LaMichael Pirine got cut. And that it's a bit of a surprise. I was not sure if the Chiefs were going to carry 3 or 4 running backs. Thought there was a reasonable chance they might keep a 4th, and I thought Pirine made absolutely the best case for himself to be that 4th running back on the roster. Releasing him doesn't preclude, once again, that he could come back onto the practice squad. with him being cut most likely, and Derrick Prince is also on that cut list, tells me that the Chiefs are going to carry three running backs. So it'll be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it'll be Isaiah Pacheco, and Jerick McKinnon. Those are three they're going to ride with. They'll get some guys onto the practice squad that they need. Remember, P-Run was on the practice squad last year. With the state of the running back market in the NFL right now, I think there's a very high likelihood that if the Chiefs want Derrick Prince on the practice squad, they can get him there too. So, and honestly, I mean, with the state of the NFL running back market, a guy like Derrick Prince might be available after Wednesday. It's not a guarantee that he would just necessarily get scooped up by another team. And if the Chiefs have injury, problems down the road, Prince could still be an option. We'll see what happens. The running back position is just so devalued, and there's a lot of guys that are a lot alike. Teams truly and fans truly value their own running backs, and it really makes it hard to me to evaluate the guys that are around the league. Because I'll tell you, as I think attached that Chiefs fans got to Derrick Prince, and as much attention as he got in Kansas City, in part because the coaches and the general manager were talking him up. That doesn't mean he has the same value across the league. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Cole, I was surprised that P-Run got cut. I think there's still a reasonable chance that he'll land on the practice squad. But I thought they would keep four, especially with Pacheco's injury situation, even though I think he's 100% and there's no concerns that he's going to be limited in any way. I still thought they might have the insurance. And you bring on the next great question, which I wanted to kind of go through. If we're just going to go down from top to bottom with the quarterback situation, the Chiefs have waived Shane Buechele. They also waived Chris Oladokun. And I was kind of surprised on both those takes. With Buechele, I figured that he would either be on this team or there was even a decent chance that he might get traded. I know there was some interest, it sounded like, from around the league. That he might get, might be another team interested. If there was interest from around the league, clearly not something that the Chiefs could agree on with anyone. I certainly thought that with the new roster reconstruction rules and encouraging a third quarterback, that there was a really good chance that the Chiefs might keep three, especially since they've had Buechele on the roster since November of 2021. So I thought there was a really good chance that they would go ahead and keep him. Chris Oladokun, I think, is ready to be a number three quarterback. I've already been impressed with him before his performance on Saturday against the Cleveland Browns. I thought that was a really good outing for him. I think there's a lot of potential there. And honestly, between him and Buechele, I think Oladokun is more of a, for lack of a better word, Mahomesian quarterback. He's not the same talent. No, not at all. I mean, that's not the same thing. But can he do some of the same things as far as running the same offense? And you wouldn't have to streamline things dramatically if he's in there. Yeah, I mean, I think he's shown that athleticism and that movement. He can do some of those things. He doesn't have the arm and the vision, obviously, those things that Mahomes has. But I've been pretty impressed with Chris. And I think there's a reasonable chance that if Buechele obviously gets picked up by somebody else, I think Oladokun would be the number three quarterback on the practice squad. And I don't think that's a big loss for the Chiefs. I think they'd be pretty happy with that. The rest of that quarterback room, obviously that means that Blaine Gabbert's going to be your number two guy. And for me, I think it was an easy decision. I was a little bit surprised that the Chiefs gave Buechele the number two opportunity in the way that they did over the last week of camp in the preseason, because they had given Blaine Gabbert the number two reps all the way through, from OTAs all the way through until that game against Arizona. They had been giving Blaine Gabbert number two reps. And then they let, as I expected, Buechele was going to play that game, and Gabbert wasn't supposed to play against Arizona. Gabbert does end up coming in after Buechele rather just went out and absolutely lit it up. And then what does Gabbert do? He goes out and lights it up too. They both had great outings. But I think that outing against Cleveland for both of them was pretty informative for the Chiefs. They needed to say, I think Buechele go out there early in a game with the first team offense and really prove something. And I don't know that he did. And then Gabbert goes out with, really the second and third team offense, and once again looks pretty sharp. So I thought Gabbert has looked pretty good through most of the preseason and through training camp. I know there have been some questions, but I really didn't think there had been anything wrong with Gabbard. I mean, I thought that there were some pretty good comparisons between him and Chad Henne. I think that he's absolutely got the prerequisites that the Chiefs want in that second quarterback. So I think they're going to be okay there. I don't think that I don't think there's an issue there. I mean, I think the Chiefs are pretty happy with him, and potential interest in other quarterbacks around the league. Question there in the stream about Wentz. I don't know that the Chiefs are going to be interested in anybody else. I think that they would be fine if Buechele or Oladokun comes back on the practice squad as number 3. Gabbard as the backup behind Mahomes. Gabbard, for the most part, seems like he's been fitting in very well. So I don't know that there's any interest out there in going out and finding anybody else. We are still going through here and finding out, and Chris throwing out there 10 offensive linemen. I haven't seen the official numbers yet. I haven't seen the final breakdown, but I'll tell you what, I mean, on my 53-man roster projections, every single one that I did this preseason, I was trying to find a way to keep 10 offensive linemen. I think there's that much talent. I mean, there's some questions on that second group, but the really tough thing for me was, trying to find a way that you can let go from a couple of these guys that have got some great experience. And especially when I think you got the tackle situation that the Chiefs have. Donovan Smith and Juwan Taylor, I think, are going to be great players for the Chiefs this year. I mean, so far from what we've seen, I hesitate to use the word upgrade because it might not necessarily be significantly better from what the Chiefs had with Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley last year, but it's going to be different. They're both different players. And I think in a lot of ways, even though Donovan Smith certainly is older and may not have the same athleticism that Orlando Brown has right now, but Donovan Smith is pretty savvy, and he fits in with the Chiefs' blocking scheme and what Andy Heck wants those guys to do, and especially with how Patrick Mahomes wants those guys on the outside to block. So I think you wanted them, but Donovan Smith's older. He's got some injury histories in the last couple of years, so I think you want some experience. Wanya Morris is a great prospect. Chiefs are absolutely, excited about him for the future. They're really hoping that maybe he can be a starter down the road, whether it's on the left side or the right side, but he's not ready right now. So if they needed to swing tackle, somebody to start right now, Wanya Morris wouldn't be that guy, but he needs to be on the 53. He's not going anywhere, so they're going to keep him. And that's why it came down to me. It was going to be really, really tough choosing between Prince Tega Wanogho and between Lucas Niang. Both those guys, for me, would be extremely hard to let go of. So, and I'm assuming based on what we've seen here, that's where the Chiefs are going to end up with 10 offensive linemen, and they're going to have 5 tackles. That, to me, was how I was trying to get there. I had a difficult time. Now, one of the reasons why I didn't get there is because I had the Chiefs keeping 4 running backs, and I had keeping 3 quarterbacks. Once you make one of those decisions, keeping 10 offensive linemen is better and easier. And remember, once again, I do emphasize to everybody, this is initial 53. This is not your opening week roster. There's a lot that can still change. Now, for the Chiefs with a Thursday night game, it's a little more difficult because they're going to start practice on Sunday. Right now, the group will have a few days off here as part of the CBA, so they're kind of in the middle of that break right now. They will start getting back into the building on Friday. That's essentially their Monday this week, on that Friday for a Thursday night game. So really, the Chiefs won't be getting back in the building with all the players until Friday. And in that case, kind of having a lot of changes on the 53 from what you get right now, there'll be a few tweaks. I would imagine that, most of those will be players that the Chiefs know if they do make some changes. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be taking 10 offensive linemen into week 1. I mean, they could still make some moves and juggle some things around, but it's at least a starting point. But like I said, I had a hard time during my breakdowns of trying to figure out how to get down to 9 offensive linemen. If that's where the Chiefs fall down, and there's a few other things they need to figure out too, because Nick Allegretti's been banged up with the shoulder injury. Doesn't appear to be anything long-term, but that's something that you need to be prepared for. And I know that the Chiefs did waive Austin Ryder, who's a veteran center who could be the number 2 guy behind Creed Humphrey if they need him. Austin Ryder can be on the practice squad. You can use him as a promotion. That's been a spot that he's been in before, so it wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs did bring him back. Mike Caliendo, too, is a possibility of being in there as a backup center. So the Chiefs have a few different possibilities. But we'll see what happens with. But that's why I do always remind people when we are here and this part of the roster construction, initial 53 is the key word. Yeah, because a lot of things could still change. Well, like I said, I don't think that they'll change as much for the Chiefs since I do have that Thursday night game to open things up. There could still be, especially because Brett Veach is going to be looking at the waiver wire, looking at all the guys who are available that have been released by other teams today. And, for those of you who don't know, just to remind everybody what will happen, everybody goes on waivers today. It's happened at 3 o'clock Central Time, Kansas City Central Time. Those players are on waivers until 11 a.m. Wednesday morning. At 11 o'clock, all the waiver claims are in. Shortly thereafter, usually by noon Central Time, Kansas City time, those will then go out to around the league. So then everybody will know who is available and who's not. And then team can start building their practice squads and signing free agents and not having to worry about whether or not they cleared waivers or anything. So, right now, that's what Brett Veach and his staff are doing. They are combing over all the cuts that have gone on around the league and seeing if there's anybody they want to put a waiver claim in for. Now, remember, the Chiefs have the dead last spot in waiver claims from winning the Super Bowl. So, if they want somebody on waivers, it means all 31 other teams are going to have passed on that player. So no guarantee. And in fact, it's pretty unlikely that they'll get anybody off of waivers. But it's always possible. I mean, it's happened before. So if there's somebody the Chiefs really do like, it's a possibility it may happen. But otherwise, I wouldn't imagine that it will. But like I said, stranger things have happened. Next question that I see on the stream is about Nico Remigio. And I'm looking through. If anybody has seen it yet, I've been talking to you guys, so I have been trying to go through here everything that is on Twitter right now and all the other updates on my text streams to see if I've seen anything on him. I haven't seen anything yet. So if any of you guys have seen anything, feel free to post it in the stream there and let me know if anything on Nico. I was imagining that he was going to end up on injured reserve and just be a redshirt year for him. I was a little bit surprised that the Chiefs had taken as long as they did, although we talked about with the waiver wire, there's sometimes advantages to that. If you wait to place a player like Nico on injured reserve, you can kind of sometimes sneak them through at the end rather than because, if they had placed Nico on injured reserve earlier than this, it would have automatically ended his season. They could still have placed him on injured reserve today, and it would automatically end his season. The other option they would have would be to release him and waive him with an injury designation, which means that if another team could claim him, but if that nobody claims him, then he would return to the Chiefs on injured reserve, but it would also end his season. If he were to make the active roster, the Chiefs could then place him on injured reserve as a designated to return. But that just seemed like it was going to be really difficult to do with the depth of this receiver room, and keeping 8 wide receivers was going to be really, really tough. So I don't know that was necessarily going to be an option for the Chiefs. And, and still waiting to see if we get the official word on him and about what happened. But I still think the most likely outcome for Nico was going to be that he ends up on injured reserve. And this basically be a redshirt year, just like a lot of it was for Justin Ross last year. And that would not be a problem whatsoever. I mean, obviously it's worked out really well for Justin Ross. So getting him to have that redshirt year, I think would be great for Nico. I mean, I don't know that there's anything that from a development standpoint that he would benefit from out just physically being out there. But I do think that he would benefit from just having a year in the playbook, a year in the meeting rooms, a year to watch these other guys in that receiver room and learn some things. And honestly, especially from a guy like Richie James, I think that would be a really good influence on Nico this year and learning from him. just how to play the position, how to be a returner in this league. I think that it would be a really positive influence for him. And while we're on the subject of the receiver room, let's just talk about that. And that, the Chiefs certainly at bare minimum are keeping 7 receivers. The real question mark was going to be Justin Ross and whether or not he was going to make it. And I didn't think that there was much doubt there. I thought Justin Ross was absolutely going to be on this roster. So, to me, that's not a huge surprise. I thought he was definitely going to make this active roster. Now the question is going to be who is going to be active and when. You've got 7 receivers. More than likely, the Chiefs most weeks are only going to have 5 active. So you're going to have 2 guys that are down. Wouldn't surprise me in the very least if for week 1 that Kadarius Toney is one of those guys. There's just absolutely no reason to push him back too quickly. And when Andy Reid, is saying that there's a chance that he may get back out there, that he could be available for week 1, when I hear there's a chance, I usually hear it the other way, that it's more likely there's a pretty good chance that he's not available. And I know from talking to the Chiefs coaches and staff that there's just absolutely no interest whatsoever in pushing Kadarius Toney faster than he needs to. They want him to be healthy. They want him to be available for as many games as possible this season. And there's really no interest in pushing him out there faster than he needs to. So between that and the fact that the Chiefs are probably going to be having 7 wide receivers on this active roster, there's really no reason to accelerate your timeline with Kadarius Toney. Now, does that mean that Justin Ross has a better chance of getting on the field and early on in the season? Yeah, I think it does. But it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs do. Like I said, it's 7 receivers are not going to play every single week. They're going to have to kind of pick and choose a little bit. And don't be surprised if there's some weeks where Justin Ross is the guy who is down. There might be some weeks when even, Rice could be down. It wouldn't surprise me. And I know that, he gets a lot of criticism, but one of the things about Justin Watson, coaching staff loves him. They really do love themselves some Justin Watson. And one of the things that Andy Reid talks about is just how good of a complimentary receiver that he is, that he's the guy that they can plug into any position, which is really the one and only receiver that they've got that they feel like they can plug into all 3 places. And 2, they trust him to be running the right routes and being in the right spots. And that's the guy that they believe helps other guys get open. So, Justin Watson's going to play a lot of snaps this year. Don't be surprised by it. It's possible that the other guys develop faster, and because they are more athletic and, have bigger upside, maybe they do push Justin Watson for some playing time. But during the preseason and during training camp, when Kadarius Toney went down, Watson was the guy that was stepping into his place, and it wasn't some of the other receivers. So we'll see how that plays out. But for the early part of the season, I would be surprised if you saw Kadarius Toney. 1, I'd be almost surprised you saw him in week 1. And 2, once he does get on the field, I think there's going to be a little bit of a snap count for him. So, there will be probably some effort to get some of the other guys out there. And Justin Ross may get those opportunities. We will see. I'm looking out here. I'm kind of scanning my emails and everything to see if anything has come in yet. Usually the Chiefs send out their roster, their final 53 roster, and announce their roster cuts, usually about 3:45 or so. So it could be coming up. Now, one thing, the Chiefs were a little bit of slowpokes today. Normally, and you kind of saw this around the league, a lot of teams around the league take advantage of starting to make those moves immediately. Some teams were making their cuts on Sunday. The Chiefs did not release anyone or waive anyone whatsoever until today. And the first move that they made officially that we learned about was the move with Carolina. But it was really until after 11:30 when some of the first moves started getting made and getting out there. And I'm a little intrigued about why the Chiefs waited so late. It's kind of interesting to me. There could be some gamesmanship there that Brett Veach was trying to do by waiting until the last minute to, maybe make it their guys to have a little bit less time on the market. Wouldn't be surprised if that was a little bit of their thinking. It could have been that their hands were full with some other things. They had a couple of trades that they pulled off this morning. One sending Amir Smith-Marset to Carolina, which it wasn't a big return. It's a swap of 7th-round picks in 2025. But honestly, for a player that the Chiefs were going to have to put on waivers anyway, Smith-Marsette, as good as he was during the preseason, was not going to make the 53. Getting an upgrade in the 7th round rather is a decent return. I mean, if you're able to get that rather than let him get away for nothing, moving up 10, 20 spots in the 7th round, given how Brett Veach and his staff is successful as they have been in the 7th round, that's a decent return for me. So I don't think that's anything to sneeze at. I think I would take that. And then the other trade with Neil Farrell coming over from Detroit, or from Vegas rather. I have not had a chance to look at his stuff yet, and it is intriguing, obviously. And we'll circle back in a minute and talk about how that trade ties in with Chris Jones that Clinton's asking on the stream about him, and we'll circle back to it. But that is indicative to me that the Chiefs had a really hard time figuring out their defensive line rotation in training camp. It was pretty clear that after Tershawn Wharton and Derrick Nottie, there was a lot of discomfort there with their defensive line. So I'm a little. I think it's a little concerning that they make this trade, for one, because I think there's a reasonable chance that they're going to be looking at Farrell to come in and maybe play significant snaps early on, because they released Danny Shelton, Phil Hoskins is out there. It really, to me, is telling to me that, and based on what we saw in training camp, that Chiefs have Derrick Nottie, they've got Tershawn Wharton. I'm not sure who they trust after that. And I like Keandre Coburn. I've been very impressed with him. He's a big body. He reminds me a lot of Colin Saunders. He reminds everybody of Colin Saunders in a lot of ways, maybe both good and bad, because, one thing is that he is a big body, and it's easy to see how that, that could be an issue in year one as he's learning to play in the NFL and having stamina be an issue. But he had a hard time moving up the depth chart. And whether that was just simply because the Chiefs, knew that it was going to be a developmental year for him and that he was going to be more of a role player and maybe more of a second half player, that they just didn't accelerate him. But also they were trying to figure out what they have. And I think what they have told us is that after Nottie and after Wharton, they just really don't have a lot of comfort there on the interior of that defensive line. And I asked Steve Spagnuolo about that at the end of the preseason and training camp, and he acknowledged that, and said that, hey, there's some years that you go into the first 4 weeks of the season that you're still trying to figure things out, and with the defensive line and especially the interior, they're in that spot. And so now it brings us back to the Chris Jones part of the conversation, which we touched on at the beginning, but for those of you who weren't here, the upshot of it is that with Chris not being here, with Chris not, one, apparently not getting a new deal, two, there not being a trade, most likely scenario that we're going to find out when the Chiefs have their report coming out here is that Chris Jones is going to be going on the did not report list. That means that he will not count against the 53-player roster, and his $19.5 million salary won't count against him for the salary cap. It doesn't necessarily mean that he won't play week one if he were to show up tomorrow, but it's a pretty good chance that he would not play. If he does go on did not report, the Chiefs would have a reasonable chance of getting a roster exemption for a week or two, which means that he would not get paid for those weeks, and he would be able to practice though and get up to speed. And hey, I'm one of these guys that I have zero concerns about what kind of shape that Chris Jones is in and what kind of work that he has done. I don't have any concerns about that whatsoever. But coaches are right. Andy Reid is absolutely right when he says there's a difference between being in shape and being in football shape. And Chris Jones right now is not in football shape. He can do anything he wants to in Miami to stay on his edge, but if he's going up against anybody that he can find in Miami, he's not going up against Joe Thuney in a practice. So he is not playing in preseason games in Miami. So he is not getting that football work. So that to me is the concern, that once Chris Jones, if he does get in here, it's going to take some time. So yeah, what does Chris Jones mean right now? I mean, I think it means that you can expect to start the season without Chris Jones on the field. And that's a concern because I don't think that the Chiefs right now are happy with the depth of that defensive tackle group. And I'll be interested to see what it does look like once this roster finally comes out. I think there's a lot of questions there. So we'll see what happens. There was a question in the stream earlier about the biggest surprise for me on the roster cuts today. And I think for me, I mean, I probably would go with the quarterback situation right now. There's nothing that's been too surprising about some individuals. I mean, and I thought that the toughest decisions all along. I talked to Brett Veach a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the fact that this team, for the most part, felt like it was a squad that the depth charts at each position were fairly ironed out. Now, a few things changed. The running back group changed for sure. I think from the beginning of training camp to the end, with Prince kind of falling down and P. Ryan moving up the depth chart. But for the most part, it was pretty ironed out with just only injuries affecting things. But the most difficult decisions were going to be, do you keep a fifth safety or a sixth corner? Do you, and it looks like Chiefs may have a sixth linebacker on this roster when it comes out later today. And that's maybe a little bit of a surprise to me too. But as far as just the individual names go about who is getting released today or getting waived, both Buechele and Oladokun getting waived is a surprise. I thought the Chiefs would keep a third quarterback. I'm really interested now to see if Buechele clears waivers. I think there's a reasonable chance that he won't. And if that's the case, then I think it certainly increases the chances that Oladokun will be that third quarterback. And like I said, to me, that's not too scary. I like Chris. I think he's got a lot of potential. And like I've said, I think that, as far as how he plays, I think he's got a lot of Mahomes in him. And I think as far as game planning goes, that's not a bad thing. I'm still looking through here. And once I get better at this, I swear, we'll be able to do this a little better as far as, scrolling through Twitter. And when we do some of these live shows, I probably didn't pick the greatest time of all time to do my first live show, but I really wanted to get this going to start the season. So I appreciate you all bearing with me as I kind of muddle through here. And hopefully it's, like I said, not too much of an unmitigated disaster. And if you have any questions, fire them out in the comments section. I'm trying to keep up and trying to take a look out for them. So if you've got any questions, fire away. I'm glad to try and answer them. Looking through here just to see if we can get some more cuts. I know Kendall Blanton, it looks like one of the more recent ones, the ones that we know about. Not a big surprise. I thought there was a chance that he does get onto the practice squad, but we'll see. The real question to me was going to be Matt Bushman, and I have not seen or heard anything on Matt Bushman yet. I suppose you could put Blake Bell in there as well, because Blake Bell had one of those contracts that would be very easy to release and sign back tomorrow. I know some of you are kind of familiar with the concept, but one thing, and it's a peculiar NFL roster peculiarity, is that if you want to be designated to return from injured reserve, you have to be on the 53-man roster first. So there's some things you don't have to be on the 53. For Charles Omenihu, for example, is going to be starting on the suspended list. He can go straight to the suspended list, doesn't have to be on the 53. But if you have a player who you want to put on injured reserve, but you want the option to bring him back later this year, you have to put him on the 53 first and then put him on IR. And, Nick Jones is a great example of a player that I think might end up on injured reserve with that fractured hand. In order to do that, you could have a roster spot. Well, a great example you may remember from last year, Chiefs released Marcus Kemp because he's a vested veteran. He's a guy that you can release, doesn't go to waivers because he has more than 4 years experience, and just becomes a free agent. And you as a team can make a handshake deal to say, hey, we're going to release you, but we plan on signing you back immediately, once we're able to get this other guy on injured reserve. So, it's possible. Now the veterans whose contracts fit into that situation, Blake Bell is one, Danny Shelton was another. Technically, Deion Bush could fit in that too, and I should probably fold him in a little bit with the conversation of surprise cuts, because he did have a guaranteed contract portion of it. He had a $350,000 signing bonus that the Chiefs are going to have to eat. Now, he did have a minimum base salary, so if the Chiefs were to sign him back, that actually wouldn't cost them. And interestingly, with Bush, even though he did have that guaranteed money, if they brought him back and signed him at a veteran minimum salary, they'd also get a benefit from that, because when you sign vested veterans to a minimum salary, you actually get a little bit of cap savings as an encouragement to sign those guys. So they actually get a little bit of money back if they did bring him back. But, Deion Bush was the fifth safety. I don't think there was any doubt about that. Shamari Connor really played impressively. And I thought there was a reasonable chance that Connor could be the fourth safety. He's going to be a third safety going into this. He's played just that well, and I think he's ahead of Mike Edwards right now. And that's not a slight on Mike Edwards. That is a compliment to Shamari Connor that he has played just that well. So that's a good problem for the Chiefs to have. If Chiefs are a spot where they can let it go, like a guy like Deion Bush, who is a solid special teams player and a strong veteran presence, if they feel like they can walk away from him, then they're telling me that they truly believe in Shamari Connor. So that's a good thing to have. And, and I'm interested in what is going to happen, because usually the Chiefs do keep 10 defensive backs. So if they're down to 4 safeties, you would think that they're going to have 6 corners. Well, they also released Khalif Halassi. They've released Echo Boydo, which to me would be the next guys up in that option, behind Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson. So I'm a little bit intrigued now to see, what that cornerback room does look like. That's kind of surprising to me. I mean, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Chiefs keeping 6 corners because of the injury issues that they have right now. They've lost Najee Johnson. They're not going to have Nick Jones, certainly at least at the beginning of the season. And you got L'Jarius Sneed, who hasn't practiced since July 28th. So to me, that's a legitimate reason why you would want to carry an extra corner. I'm just not sure who that extra corner is right now. It could very well be that it's somebody who's not on this roster. There are some interesting names out on the waiver wire who've been released. I am sure that the Chiefs are going to be looking at that. So maybe that might be a position where the Chiefs do, bring in somebody from the outside to supplement that position. And it could be maybe one of these young guys does come back on the roster in the next couple of days. Have a question in the comments section about BJ Thompson, and very intrigued. BJ was the challenging one for me in my roster projections because I love the talent. I mean, there's a lot of athleticism there. The size is the question. He is a big time tweener. He's a lot like Isaiah Simmons that you just saw move from Arizona to the Giants. They're very similar in size. BJ's a little bit taller, but weight wise, they're about identical. And, weighing 240, 245, playing defensive end, especially at his height, is really, really light. So, but, with his size, he's kind of a tweener. He's a little bit too tall to be a linebacker, maybe not big enough to be an edge rusher. But I'm intrigued. I mean, the Chiefs drafted him for a reason. I mean, a couple of reasons. One is that he could actually be a really interesting, special teams weapon, considering he seems to be so good at blocking kicks. Maybe Dave Tope can figure out how to use him on the blocking team. But, is he ready to be a part of the rotation at end? I don't know. I expect this to be a little bit of a redshirt year for him. Maybe he does play. You're right. He's got a lot of speed, but it's going to be that strength, how much of it and how much bend does he have at the size that he has to be able to get around guys. I think there's a lot of work to be done there with him. So I don't know. We'll see, but I think he's a developmental prospect. I wasn't certain if he was going to make the 53. I thought there was a chance that the Chiefs might try and squeeze him onto the practice squad because he does need seasoning, and I'm not sure that there was going to be a lot of interest around the league for a guy who is a tweener like him. But they're going to put him on the 53 and trying to protect him for now. And we'll see if this is just a stash situation where they want to keep him and season him there, but they just want to make sure they didn't lose him, or they think there's a place for him. We'll see. But like any rookie, especially at the edge position, if he does make an impact, I think it would be later in the season before that comes along. Bart has a question, and this is a little bit different take on the Chris Jones situation. Is it have both parties dug in and won't back down? I don't know if that's entirely the case. That could absolutely be a part of it. But the reason why I think that we're here at this situation it's not a couple of $1 million. It's not just a situation that the Chiefs are offering one number per year and Chris Jones wants another. I get the sense and believe that the problems are much deeper than that. That it's, like I said, it's not just the annual average value per year. If this was a question of 30 million per year versus 27 million per year, the easy answer is 28 and a half. You would think that both sides would be able to meet there in the middle and have a compromise. But the fact that they're not, it tells me that it's not just a couple of million. We're probably talking about more likely an issue with guaranteed money. How much are the Chiefs willing to offer in guarantee versus how much Chris Jones wants? It's a matter of years. Are the Chiefs offering 3 and Chris Jones wants 4? And if you're talking about that, if you're talking about years and you're talking about guarantee, you're not talking a couple of $1 million. You're talking 20 or $30 million difference. And if that's the case, then I think you see why that this has collapsed the way that it has. And neither side has gone public, so we're not knowing exactly where each side stands precisely. But the fact that it's August 29th and we're in this situation, to me, it's telling that this is not a million or $2 apart. This is significant millions apart and years apart. And if that's the case, I mean, I think you have to have serious doubts about whether it's going to be achievable. And I think that the bad thing is that both sides need each other. I think that Chris Jones truly needs the Chiefs. There's just not a lot of teams that can make a trade right now and acquire a Chris Jones and pay him. And the places that would, I don't think they're good homes for Chris Jones. And, and I was telling somebody earlier today, I mean, I feel like that Chris is losing out on a lot here. I mean, the Chiefs are going to lose out a lot if they don't keep him and they're not able to get him in the fold, because they need him on that interior line. They need him to be a pass rusher. That affects everything on that defense. I don't know if this is the same defense without him. This team wants to have a top 10 defense. I'm not sold that it can be a top 10 defense without Chris Jones. But I think about Chris Jones and his legacy and what he wants. And I've seen it before, I guess. I've seen Jared Allen. I've seen Tony Gonzalez. I've even seen Neil Smith struggle, coming back to Kansas City and having a base and having a career and being welcomed and making money. Chris Jones stays a Chief. I think he's got a reasonable chance at the Hall of Fame, and he can do anything he wants to with anybody in Kansas City the rest of his career, business-wise. He's going to be a beloved figure. But if he leaves this situation for greener pastures elsewhere, I think it's going to totally ruin his legacy in Kansas City, and I don't know that he will be able to rebuild that. So, I mean, that's why I keep saying I think that for Chris, he needs the Chiefs just as badly as they need him. And I don't think that it's going to work out if that doesn't. I know Dylan has a question here, moving on to another topic, and it brings up a couple of running backs, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, because of running back cuts. I don't get the sense that the Chiefs are interested in a big name running back. And Kareem, as noted in the comments, I do think that's a non-starter. I don't think that the Chiefs are, and as an organization, are interested in going back to the Kareem situation again. Fournette might be a little bit different, but at the same time, I don't know that the Chiefs are willing and ready to go to that. I mean, they've got a pretty, solid philosophy here with the running backs, and they've broken it a little bit. I mean, they didn't spend a lot of money to get guys like LaShawn McCoy and Ronald Jones, but they've tried that experiment before, and I think they've fully embraced the concept that the running back position is something that you can win championships without a Zach, without Ezekiel Elliott, without a big name back. You don't have to have Jonathan Taylor. You don't have to have a Leonard Fournette. I mean, you can win with 7th round running backs, with undrafted guys, with, free agents that you've signed affordably like Damian Williams. So I don't think the Chiefs are ever going to be a team that's going to go out there and throw much money at a running back. But I also think that with the running back position, they want the right guy that's going to fit in. So I think they're pretty happy with the room they've got. Once again, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they did look for a different target, maybe somebody out there that that they could bring in. But I'm not sold that it's going to be one of those big names. I think they would be looking really for specific, niche types of running backs. And look at the success they've had with them. I mean, Jerick McKinnon has been an absolute home run addition to this team, and was not a big name signing. Wasn't a big cost signing. Those are the guys that you're looking for. And if you're able to keep a LaMichael Pirine and or Deneric Prince on the practice squad, I think that's exactly what the Chiefs want and what they need. Dylan, you got another good point here in a question. You hate this team's short distance offense, and I don't think you're wrong. I mean, that's something that now. And there have been times the Chiefs have had a pretty good, short distance game. They did a couple of years ago. That their short yardage offense wasn't that bad. Last year, it took a step backwards, and I am super curious about it because I don't know if it's any one thing. I mean, I definitely get the argument that why are you in third and short and even fourth down situations? Why do sometimes you take your best player in Patrick Mahomes and maybe take him out of the play, whether it's with the bulldozer, that kind of power quarterback sneak without an actual quarterback in there, or they've gotten rid of the fullback, so you are not going to see the halfback dive anymore. Even when they ran the Blake Bell play during the preseason game, Andy Reid said he just wanted to see it because it's not something that they can practice in training camp. I'm intrigued. I mean, we haven't seen what this team's going to do on fourth and short and on third down, because certainly Andy Reid's not going to run any of his 40 best plays in a preseason game. So we haven't seen that yet, but I have a feeling that they're going to try and go a little bit different route this year. And the fact that they're not bringing in the fullback, I think, is an even better indication that they're going to take a different approach in those short yardage situations. Because, if you're going to get rid of your fullback and then you're going to use a tight end in the backfield in those situations and run power football, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, now if you want to put an offensive lineman, I guess, in the backfield and try and run some power football that way, maybe, but that also seems pretty conservative, and I'm not sure that Andy Reid's that conservative. So I'm really surprised to see what they do. I mean, we'll see if they evolve a little bit in those short yardage situations, but I'm intrigued because I think they're going to take a different approach to it this year because of their personnel. So get a drink of my Milo's tea real quick there. Am I surprised with releasing Deion Bush? Touched on it earlier, but I am a little bit. I thought they would keep 5 safeties. Bush was clearly the 5th safety as far as how it looked like the depth chart was shaken up. Good special teams player. Could be back. I mean, he is still an affordable player. Wasn't a costly move for them to let go of him. I mean, they could still save some money by bringing him back. So wouldn't be surprised if he did return, but a mild surprise, not huge, just a small surprise that they let go of Bush. But once again, I mean, the bigger thing is I'm curious to see how many defensive backs that the Chiefs are going to be keeping. That to me is the bigger question, because if they're keeping six cornerbacks and 4 safeties, that makes sense. But and there could be a surprise. I mean, there's some other safeties out there. I mean, there's, I think, 1 or 2 safeties that we haven't gotten an official word yet that they were releasing, some of the younger guys. And maybe, because of the way that they're using some of their personnel, it looks like they're keeping Cam Jones, who was a really impressive linebacker, but keeping a 6th linebacker is really surprising to me. And it could very well be a situation that if you're keeping a 6th linebacker, that's where you're getting away from a safety. And, and the Chiefs are, they're using, I mean, some of their linebackers and safeties interchangeably. So you can kind of maybe see that they're stealing from one to supplement another, and it's not that big of a loss. So we'll see. But if Cam Jones, as it's been reported from the Kansas City Star, if he is going to be on this roster, that's a surprise keep for me. It's not a stunner, because I thought he had a really good camp, but it was definitely not something that I mean, I'm not sure if I saw him on anybody's 53 player projection, and it was definitely somebody that I would have had at the top of my practice squad list. But I was just very surprised that that the Chiefs are apparently keeping him on the 53. And now Dylan's asking about Anthony Everett, being released, and yeah, and there's some other players around the league. I mean, I know Bradley Roby got released from the Saints. There are always some interesting players that get cut around the league, and and certainly looking at supplementing some positions. And for me, if I've said this a couple of times of late that the Chiefs with at least their defensive back situation, they're not in the spot where they were a few years ago, where they were signing street free agents in August to come in and start. This team is so much better at cornerback and in the secondary now that they really didn't have to do that. They had such a good pipeline of young guys, but now they've had some injuries that have challenged that depth a little bit. And they don't need to go out and get somebody, the street free agent, or, even somebody off the waiver wire to come in and start for them. But, it might be worth looking at some of these guys. If only to have a veteran presence that could come into that secondary group. I think they could really use that just to reinforce the position a little bit. It's a young group. So if they were able to get a veteran to come in, and to me, there's definitely a difference between, signing Orlando Scandrick and asking him to come in and be one of your top two corners versus, getting like an Anthony Everett or a Bradley Roby or somebody like this to come in and maybe be your fifth or sixth corner. I mean, if you're getting able to get a veteran like that in that situation, that to me is a much better place to be. I am going to have to jump off here in a couple of minutes to go over and talk with Ryan Tracy over Locked On Chiefs, and we'll be talking a lot more about the roster projection. I was really hoping the Chiefs would have their official 53 out here before we got to the end, so we could definitely talk about it. We're still just waiting for a few moves to be made and to figure out where this group is going to be. One thing that we really haven't touched on in depth, but I do want to kind of talk about a little bit, is going to be defensive line. We talked about it obviously in the sense of Chris Jones not being here, looking like he's going to go with the did not report. The Chiefs making the trade with Vegas to pick up Neil Farrell to reinforce that interior line. They're not keeping a lot of guys on the interior. I think Daniel Wise has been released, Phil Hoskins. I'm waiting for to officially hear about Chris Williams and Matt Dickerson, but right now, I mean, you're looking at going into the season where you're going to have Derrick Nottie and Tershawn Wharton as your starters. And I have a little bit of concern there because Wharton is coming off the injury. He missed a little bit more time, not only at the beginning of training camp, but in the middle of camp again, when that knee started having some swelling. He's only just recently come back. To me, that's a little bit of a warning sign. I mean, I think he's got to be on a little bit of a snap count to start the season. So that's a concern for me. And after that, Keandre Coburn, but that's a guy that the Chiefs haven't invested a lot of, faith in right now. Maybe they have more faith in him than they have shown through the preseason and training camp. But that to me is a question mark. And then what do you have? I mean, Neil Farrell may very well end up getting some very valuable reps to start this season. I am waiting to see one guy I haven't heard yet about making this team is Malik Herring. And I'm assuming that he has when Joshua Kando was released. To me, that was an either or. I gave the edge to Herring. I thought he would be the guy that won that last position. If for no other reason than the Chiefs had been kicking him inside quite a bit and asking him to play some tackle. And that might be one of the answers to this, which is that if the Chiefs are going to struggle getting pressure on the quarterback without Chris Jones, how do they compensate? Well, one of the things that we saw in training camp quite a bit was putting extra edge rushers on the field. And while you've seen the Chiefs do that quite a bit in third down situations where they want to go after the quarterback and, on third and long, we were seeing it in a lot of other situations too, not just third and long, but even, first and second down. And that may be what the Chiefs have to do if they want to get pressure on the quarterback, that they are going to have to put outside edge rushers on the field, 3 or 4 of them at a time, and go after the quarterback that way. Malik Herring's a guy that they feel like can do that maybe he can kick inside and be able to rush the passer that way. George Karlaftis, they're going to trust him. Mike Dane is going to be the other starter. Felix Anudike Uzama is going to be in a backup role to start. He's going to be a role player. We'll see how much he plays. Um, but I'm intrigued. I mean, I think there's a pretty good chance that we may end up seeing a lot of situations where, the Chiefs are taking off a defensive tackle and putting on another edge rusher, and they're also going to have to blitz quite a bit. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. If they want to get to the quarterback, they're going to have to blitz, and I think that's why you saw Steve Spagnuolo testing out Chamari Connor and Drew Tranquill, to see what their blitzing capabilities were. He knows what he's got in Justin Reed and L'Jarius Sneed, excellent blitzers. But I think you want to see what some of these new guys can do because they are going to have to blitz. So you're talking about bringing extra guys to get after the quarterback. You're talking about putting a lot of edge rushers out there to get after the quarterback. And the one concern I have about that is that if you are going to put extra edge rushers out there in maybe some non-traditional situations like first and second down, that you are going to see some positions where you're gonna be susceptible to the run, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on Nick Bolton and Willie Gay and Leo Chenal and Drew Tranquill. I think they can handle it, but it's going to put some pressure on them. We are getting ready to wrap up, but we have just received from the Chiefs their official 53-man roster. Excuse me. I've been up all day and talking so long. I almost inadvertently gave you all out the passcode to my phone. So if you want to know, I guess I have to change it now since I just rattled off 2 numbers from my phone. As I was trying to pull it up. Looking at who's been waived here. That maybe we haven't heard about yet. The release, Kendall Blanton, Deion Bush, Austin Ryder, Danny Shelton, no surprises there. Waived, names that we have not talked about today, DiCaprio Boodle. Matt Bushman was waived, so the Chiefs are going with 3 tight ends there. Looks like looking down, make sure Isaiah Gathings was waived as well. Jerry and Ely, running back, Ty Fry-Fogel. Chu Godric is an interesting one because he is an international pathway player. The Chiefs can sign him to the practice squad and get an exception for him so they can have a 17th player on the practice squad because he is an international pathway player. So I would expect Chu Godric to sign with the Chiefs unless somebody else swoops in and tries to pick him up. Sebastian Gutierrez, we didn't talk about, but on this list. Khalif Halassi was, along with Echo Boydo, was a couple of the cornerbacks that I thought might sneak onto the squad there at that 5th or 6th spot, but did get waived today. Andrew Hardy, Phil Hoskins, Lamar Jackson, Truman Jones. A surprise name for me here on the offensive line, Darian Kennard. This means that Prince Tega Winoga will be on the squad. Lucas Niang also on the team. Mike Caliendo not on the waive list. So Mike Caliendo has made this team. That to me is notable because I think it is an indication of one, preferring to have a little bit of flexibility there. Kennard, tackle that switched to guard this year, could still play tackle, but they really do picture him as just a guard only, but can't play center. And right now with Nick Allegretti banged up, if they need a backup center, who is that going to be? Well, right now it's going to be Mike Caliendo. If Allegretti can't play in week 1, Mike Caliendo is your guy. And that's notable to me. I mean, Caliendo was on the practice squad last year. I think Chiefs fans are going to like him. He's worked really hard. Had a really good training camp. I got to talk to him a little bit after the game on Saturday. He's a good story. So I definitely want to try and catch up with him and tell you all his story because he's been a really good find for the Chiefs. But Darian Kennard getting waived is a very big surprise to me. I do think there's a reasonable chance that he ends up back on the practice squad, but that's a surprise. That's a guy that I thought was going to make this roster. But Chiefs out this time. Moving on. Isaiah Norman, Cornell Powell, Ty Scott from Missouri State. I thought had a pretty good training camp, but he obviously had a long upturn battle. Chris Williams, Daniel Wise. There's a lot of defensive tackles that are on this list. So Neil Farrell making the team. The trade from Vegas. I'll tell you what, I mean, without Chris Jones, that defensive tackle position is still a work in progress. So I do have to jump off. Like I said, you'll be able to catch me later on Locked On Chiefs or with Ryan Chase Tracy. We got 185 people watching right now, and I am so grateful for you tuning into this first one. I hope I did not embarrass myself too much. I am going to be doing more of these as the season starts. None of them will be live. There will be some recorded, doing some podcasts. We've got some hopefully exciting things coming up. You will have some guests on these things, and I will get you some sound from the locker room and talking to some of the players during the season as well. So I appreciate you all joining this first one. Thank you for the support. I truly appreciate it. I hope I did not bore you too much or embarrass myself too much. I know I had to talk entirely too much. Hopefully it wasn't too fast, but we will definitely do this again. I appreciate it. Thank you. Feel free to send your questions and everything to me anytime. And I will beg for you to hit the subscribe button on YouTube so that we can get this thing monetized. And, once we start making some money, then we can do even more fun on YouTube and everything. So I truly appreciate you, everybody. Sorry, I'm going to be late to Ryan over there, but I truly appreciate everybody tuning into this one. Thanks to support, and I will catch you all later. Take care.